going on, everyone? Welcome back to the first inaugural episode of JT Sports After Dark, where we bring on special guests and talk football, no matter if it's NFL, college football, USFL, XFL. We love all brands of American football over here at JT Sports. Welcome on, special guest, college football with Sam. What's going on, man?
It's going well. It's going phenomenally.
Yeah, so before we start, man, can you let the people know what made you become a Michigan fan?
Oh, I like the color blue since birth. And then it kind of evolved into this thing where my parents, who are Michigan State fans, it was a rivalry. It was a family rivalry thing.
And before we begin, let the people know where they can find you at and what you got planned for the channel coming up within the next couple of weeks.
You can find me just by typing at college football with Sam or college football with Sam in the YouTube search bar. And in the next couple of weeks, I have updated top 25s, Big Ten, SEC predictions, Heisman predictions, power rankings stuff, a lot of lists, and also, as always, Ohio State and Michigan content every week or every other week at minimum.
And we're going to be getting into a little bit of Ohio State, Michigan shortly on the show. But one last time, you guys make sure to subscribe and check out our guy, College Football with Sam. Has great content, has a phenomenal voice for it, man. Like, one of those apps that, reads to you when you're at dark. What they call it? Audio Mac or audio book, something like that. Like, you got one of those kind of voice, man.
Yeah, I also do want to say to my subscribers who are watching this setup is early because I just saw a comment by one of my followers who said that I'm translucent, and it's a very early setup. I need more lighting, but I kind of have a green screen thing going on. So in the future, I won't be translucent. I won't be see-through, but there will be a background similar to this for lives.
Got you, man. So before we get into it, if you haven't already, make sure that you guys subscribe to College Football with Sam. He has fantastic football content. And make sure that you guys check out the JT Sports Podcast. We are available on all podcasting platforms, wherever you get your podcast from. Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from, the JT Sports Podcast is available. And we are not just available on YouTube. We are also available on every podcasting platform. Make sure you check out the JT Sports Podcast and rate us 5 stars. We're trying to get to 100 5-star reviews before the season begins. And shortly, real quick, we have to do this. Be a little bit louder.
Yeah. Pete's takes. I do look like a ghost, but that's just temporary. I figured after dark show, can try some new things.
All right. So everybody, real quick, let me know if the audio is better. Let me know down in the comment section down below if the audio is better real quick. Just give me a quick thumbs up. Also, make sure that you guys hit that like button. Sam, one last time, can you tell everybody to subscribe?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, JT Sports is a channel that I've been watching for I'd say the past few months. I caught the channel like a little longer before that, but I've really only been watching over the past few months. And I'd say it's a great channel. I would say as well that he knows a lot more about the NFL than I do. So if you're interested in the NFL, like, go to him, because after Tom Brady retired, that's like a third or like half of my NFL knowledge is just down the drain. So
all right, man. So now that we got that out the way, let's really get into it. Northwestern Football man, they had a lot going on down there. Hazing allegations. Longtime head coach Pat Fitzgerald ends up being let go. And they now need a new head coach. And I just saw a rumor right before we went live that said that LSU, former LSU championship winning head coach Ed Orgeron, is interested in this job. Would he be a good candidate?
I think that seeing how like the culture there under him like really deteriorated after that national championship. No, 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 no. You no, not after what just happened. I don't think so. They need a builder, a guy who is culturally sound, promotes discipline, isn't necessarily like a high ceiling kind of guy that's going to get you consistent success both on and off the field.
So I'm gonna go first. Me personally, I just want to see Dan Mullen at Northwestern, just because, like, you know what happened at Florida. It ended real ugly, but it's not like he didn't have Florida playing at a really high level, and he's really good at schools like Mississippi State. So if he can be pretty solid at Mississippi State, I feel like he was a pretty decent head coach at Florida. So imagine what he could do at Northwestern. Like, they probably won't recruit at a high level under him. And plus, it's probably difficult to recruit at Northwestern. But Dan Mullen is a really good strategist.
I think it's actually a good pick that I didn't think about, just partially because the way his tenure ended at Florida was just totally memed. It's just awful. But you don't need to recruit at Northwestern. You just need to field. I mean, like, go 5-7, 6-6, 7-5. You're safe, especially after what just happened here. I mean, those allegations were serious. So the program's going to have to be rebuilt.
And with Dan Mullen, it's like with the transfer portal, it allows you to pretty much rebuild your roster on the fly, kind of how you want it. So with the transfer portal, how it is now, Dan Mullen, like, he should have no problem being able to piece together a team from scratch and being able to build a scheme around it, because he's one of the best offensive minds in college football. At least he's regarded as one. So we might as well go ahead, and if we're Northwestern and I'm their AD, I'm giving Dan Mullen a phone call right now and saying, hey, man, get out that studio and come coach this football team.
Oh, absolutely. And I'd be giving Bronco Mendenhall, Ken Nuimatalolo, the former Navy head coach, who's now the, I think, director of player success or something at UCLA, which I thought was a good hire. I'd say, like, I mean, Sharon Moore, Jesse Minter. This would be after 2023. Manny Diaz, like some young, competent coordinators. Like, I would say Brian Hartline or even Jim Knowles, but Jim Knowles is old. He's a seasoned DC, and Brian Hartline's probably going to want to stay at Ohio State forever. But, and then I saw a comment that said they need Brian Harsin, but Stefan was saying they need a boring head coach. And I think that's a great summary of it. Boring head coach, but who has a brain.
Do you like
and
Paul
Dan
Chris?
Mullen is that. Like who?
Paul Chris?
You know what? For whatever reason, I don't like the sound of that, but it's probably a good suggestion, honestly.
Now let's get to this. USC and UCLA, this is their final season in the Pac-12. They were about to enter the Big Ten, and I keep hearing a lot of narratives thrown around. Two of the most popular ones that I really disagree with are the fact that, those Cali boys ain't going to be able to play in them cold weather, 30 degree, 20 degree, cold, snowing conditions. And then, you know, you also got the people saying that the athletes going from different time zones is going to mess them up. So what's your thoughts on that? Do you think those really are going to have an effect on USC and UCLA, or are they kind of going to, like, you know, modify things a little bit towards them in a sense?
I think initially it will be disastrous, but only in big games. I think UCLA, there's some major problems for them going to adjust. Like they have Dante Moore, they're set at quarterback, they can use the portal. But watch the Oregon Ohio State game, the 2014 national title, and tell me with a straight face. Also, watch Scott Frost, Nebraska, who ran the same offense as that Oregon team, and tell me with a straight face that that offense will work in the Big Ten. It won't. The no huddle spread option will just get crushed by any defense with any size in the Big Ten. Now, USC is more interesting because they recruit better all around. They use the portal even better. Lincoln Riley's a proven coach. But in 2024, they head to Michigan and Penn State. Well, they host Michigan, but they head to Penn State. The Michigan game, at least, they get travel advantage. They get the weather, but still, we'll get to that after I talk about. With Singleton returning and Katron Allen returning, because they will in 2024, USC will surrender like 300 rushing yards. Like that will be the game where we look back and it's like, whoa, this isn't competitive. And that might be the game that finally gets Alex Grinch fired. But I think when they face like a Penn State, a Michigan, an Ohio State, where they run the football and they do it well, or maybe like even Minnesota or Wisconsin, they're going to have a hard time stopping teams that can control games and run the football well, because USC's defense thrives off of turnovers. And offensively, I mean, Oregon State is like kind of built off what Paul Chryst used to be at Wisconsin, and they held USC to 17 points, pardon me. So I think initially it'll be a huge struggle, but USC should adapt. They have the recruiting. UCLA is a little bit trickier.
Man, like, I feel like UCLA will be okay, though, because one thing about UCLA and Chip Kelly is that Chip Kelly is one of the best offensive minds in college football. Probably may not be better than Lincoln Riley, but I think we both can agree he's like top 5. So when you look at Chip Kelly, I kind of feel like he's done a really good job of tailoring his offense around. It's not finesse like how it used to be now with speed. They went from having guys like Michael James, the Anthony Thomas that were really killing you with speed, and then they go to a Zach Charbonnet from Michigan. And Zach Charbonnet was a different kind of back. He was powerful. You could run him up through the tackles. And, I do feel like UCLA has become a little bit of a team that kind of has started to embody a different physical style of play more than other teams. But it's like, I feel like if there was a team who could get their defense figured out first, I feel like it probably could be UCLA. UCLA already has made a change at defensive coordinator, and they do have a pretty good amount of experience on that defense. And they do use the transfer portal pretty well. A lot of the guys that they get in the transfer portal do pan out. So I do feel like UCLA could at least hang around in the Maryland territory.
Yeah, I think like middle of the pack, lower half of the conference is where they're definitely going to start. And another thing too is like, I'm not saying Dante Moore is Dorian Thompson Robinson, because Dante Moore is a higher ceiling. But watch DTR against Pittsburgh, where like Pittsburgh just mentally broke him and he had to be benched. Imagine what like half the Big Ten's defenses are probably as good as that Pitt defense. Like, so the Zach Charbonnet thing is actually a really good point. I just think it will be at least an adjustment, but you agree with that too. I think that we're both pretty set that it'll be an adjustment. And believe me, it'll be an adjustment for, like, I mean, Michigan going to USC or, like, even Ohio State or Penn State, but especially Michigan and Penn State, who don't necessarily have that star talent advantage. That would be tough, especially if they have any vulnerability in any realm of defense. They'll get picked apart. Because like Lincoln Riley, he went into the horseshoe and he dominated in 2017. So it's not like he can't win the Big Ten, or he can't outcoach some of the best coaches in the Big Ten. So there's that too.
Yeah, man. And then like right out the gate next year, how good do you think USC is going to be? Are they going to be able to win the Big Ten year one next year?
Do I think they're going to win the Big Ten next year? USC? That's who you're asking?
Yeah.
I was sort of surprised just because my answer is a resounding no. But that's just me. No. Look, I mean, Caleb Williams is going to be gone. Now they have Malachi Nelson. But I actually have their schedule because I'm weird and I made way too early 2024 predictions for the Big Ten and the SEC, which is really interesting. If any of you in the comments want to see a video on that in August, I'll certainly do it. But USC, they go to Penn State, they go to Purdue, they go to Maryland, but they also host Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin. I mean, there's so many different variables. And Michigan, Penn State, if Wisconsin can reload after losing a ton of people, Iowa and Illinois are always stout defensively. I mean, I have a lot of an easier time saying that Ohio State and Penn State probably in the driver's seat because of schedule, talent, returning production. Michigan, even though they might be power rated higher than even Ohio State or Penn State, they have a really tough schedule. I slot USC in that fourth. I don't think they're in the tier 1A to be favored. They can, but I don't think they will. What about you? Do you think they're going to come out and win it in year one?
I think they are. I really think that USC, with the talent and the recruiting classes that they've been bringing in under Lincoln Riley, I don't think they're going to have any problem coming out the gate. It's still football at the end of the day. It's USC, one thing about them is they're going to have good offensive linemen. They're going to have good wide receivers. They're going to have great quarterback play. Lincoln Riley is a quarterback guru. Look what he's done with his previous couple of quarterbacks. But when you look at their defense, yeah, their defense is going to have some concerns, but it's their offense is going to be good enough to outscore nearly anybody.
Yeah, that's true. It also depends on how the schedule aligns because we know the games, but we don't know the dates yet. But I just want to say for USC and for them hosting Michigan, it's a weather thing. They won't have to be the ones traveling. But jet lag, and imagine if the Penn State game's in November, so it's going to be really cold. And you line up Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen and Drew Allar, who by 2024, even though I don't think he's going to be great this year, he's definitely going to be great then. I have a hard time not seeing gaping holes, wide open play action passes, and a hornet's nest of a crowd. I just have a hard time seeing it. A team like Penn State or Ohio State, I don't know. But if they win in an environment like Beaver Stadium and they win in year one, I'll give you full props. I'll admit that I'm wrong. I mean, I'm the guy who predicted Nebraska was going to go 10-2 and be a top 10 team last year, and that just imploded on itself. So, is what it is.
Let's move on to this, man. So, there's a lot of pressure on Ryan Day and Ohio State this year, and I'm very happy that I'm not in his shoes right now, because what if Ohio State drops their third straight in the road to Michigan this year? What are the implications? What are the repercussions?
Well, what do you think they are?
Man, honestly, I don't know, because it's okay, here's the two routes it could go. You make it to the college football playoff with one loss. You probably still don't get to the Big Ten championship game again, but you may have a chance to get in this year depending on what happens, and plus you're Ohio State. So I do feel like the committee has a little bit of brand bias unless you're not in a situation where you got blown out by Michigan again, as long as you can keep it competitive. But imagine if you end up dropping another game somewhere along the road to somebody else, and then you end up, going to your bowl game and dominating. But it's like, I still don't think you move off from him. Do you? Because it's like he'll only have like 2 losses. I feel like you can't move on from a coach that is this close. You feel me?
I'm actually in perfect agreement with you, which is why I'm glad I asked you first, like what you thought. That's basically what I thought. It's what I wrote down. If he goes 11-1 and then only losses to Michigan again, the fan base gets angrier. Nothing changes. Nothing. I mean, they go 11-1. I think they're going 11-1, losing to Michigan, and they're going to reach the CFP, and they're probably going to beat whoever they face in that semifinal. Because let's face it, this isn't a guarantee, but from how I look at it, they're almost destined to be better than they were last year, just because what they have on defense. I have them going 12-2 and losing to Michigan once in Ann Arbor and once in the Natty. And if they beat Michigan in Ann Arbor, it'll be the inverse. And Ohio State will go 2-0 against Michigan in Ann Arbor and the Natty. That's one of my bold predictions. So if all that happens, nothing. But if he loses that second game, let's say he loses to Wisconsin, or James Franklin waltzes in there and avenges the 2017 loss, or Lord forbid Notre Dame beats him, which would disgust me beyond belief, he would have pressure entering 2024. You can't have what happened in 2021 where Oregon embarrassed you and Michigan does it. You can't. I don't think you can have that. He wouldn't get fired. He might not even be on the hot seat, but there would begin to be an actual it would be more serious than the reaction this year or reaction after a near undefeated season.
But that's scary though, because it's like, what coach are you going to fire that can get you to only your worst season being 2 losses? Where are you going to find another head coach that can come back in and just have that kind of production? Are you going to call Urban up? Because it's like, that's the only coach I really know that's capable of. Because it's like, Ohio State, I know the expectations are so high, but it's like 2 losses in one season, and losing to Michigan for a third straight time makes you just say, bump it. We got to move on from this, man. Are you going to replace him with Brian Hartline? It's like, who do you go from a Ryan Day, who's taken you to several college football playoff appearances? You go from him to who?
I don't know. I mean, Steve Dace from the Michigan podcast is predicting that Brian Hartline will take over as Ohio State's head coach after this year because Ryan Day leaves for the NFL, which I looked at that prediction and I'm like, no, and also no thank you, because I happen to like Ryan Day as a Michigan fan. And that's not just because we've beaten him, but I mean, he's kicked our butt before in Ann Arbor. He's going to beat Jim Harbaugh again, but he makes it competitive. He seems like a good person, and they're not going to move on from him. But I understand why Ohio State fans would want to, because when Jim Harbaugh was going 10-3 almost every year, now granted he went 8-5, 9-4, and those were the seasons that really dug it in for him. But I thought at some point for me, 10-3 and even 11-2 and not reaching the playoffs was becoming unacceptable. So I can relate to the fan base there, but it is asinine. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Day's here for another 2 decades and Ohio State at worst gets 2 losses pre-12 team playoff, 3 losses, 12-team playoff with maybe a minimum of 11 or 12 wins, a season. That wouldn't shock me at all. I mean, it's, my gosh. I mean, I don't get why he would be fired. That boggles my mind. And then you joking about returning Urban Meyer, that would just be the ultimate case. It'd be the ultimate case of irony.
Yeah, man, it's just that, I couldn't see a program moving off a coach that gives you at worst 2 losses a season and you still going to be around there. It's not like he's never going to break through. Like, he's going to have some years when they get there. Like, he's just way too close. And it's like, even the fact that people say, well, he took over Urban's program. Like, yeah, but he kind of did make it better. And it's like, there have been plenty of coaches who've taken over great programs and run them in the dirt. You feel me? So it's like going from
Larry
Ryan
Coker
Day,
being one of them.
yeah. So going from Ryan Day to somebody who can be better than what he's been at Ohio State, keeping up, how good Ohio State has been. I mean, that would be pretty difficult to do. But how are you feeling about Penn State this year? Because I really feel like Drew Allar is the him at quarterback for Coach Franklin. Because, Michigan has J.J. McCarthy. Ryan Day has had C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields. Has he finally found his one at the QB that's capable of being able to get him over the hump and winning the Big Ten East?
I think he has. But I'm reluctant to put him in that category until I see him start and until next year. But he can be. Something I think about Penn State, though, that I don't think a lot of people realize, and Steven, Armand, they're loyal subscribers of mine who I love very much in the comments. They've heard me say this a million times. So part of me feels bad because at this point it might be getting annoying. But Penn State, I think their year's 2024, and there's multiple reasons for that. But let's shelf quarterback, because quarterback, I think, could be elite, and they still don't win the Big Ten, which might sound like a paradox, but it's not. Penn State's issue, what truly separates Michigan and Ohio State from Penn State in my mind, is not quarterback. It's not even skill players. Heck, it's not even defense. I mean, Abdul Carter has the case to be the best linebacker in the Big Ten. Kalen King, the best corner in the nation. Like Adisa Isaac, Curtis Jacobs. These are other front seven players who are great. What separates the Big Two from Tier 1B, which is Penn State, because they're really close, but they're just not there yet, is interior trench play. Their guard play, their center play, their defensive tackles. That's really what separates them. That's really it. Like running back, I think Penn State can be number one, definitely top three. Tight end, deeper room than Ohio State, could have an even deeper room than Michigan, could have a better starter than Ohio State too, maybe even a better starter than Michigan. Wide receiver, we know they're not close to Ohio State, but that's just Brian Hartline's thing. Michigan totally could be better. Offensive tackle even, they have the best offensive tackle prospect in Olu Fashanu, so it's not even the whole offensive line. And defensive end, they're up there as well. It's that interior line play. And I think that I don't know exactly if these players are set to be on the interior or exterior, but Penn State's done a very good job this current recruiting class, the past recruiting class, and the class before that of recruiting high-level offensive linemen. And I think you're going to see that play out in 2024, and Allar will be better, and the running backs will be better. And I think at that point, they're probably like, you've arrived, 2024. With them this year, they can do it. I think they can go 11-1. I think they're destined to lose to the Buckeyes or Wolverines. I don't know if 12-0 is possible. And if it is, they're not the 12-0 who's going to win the national championship. But I look at them and I see 10-2. I potentially see even somewhat of a regression from last year sometimes. but they're so good talent-wise that I don't think you're going worse than 10-2 either. I mean, maybe they go 9-3, but there's a really good chance they go 11-1 too, because they match up well with Ohio State at defensive end to tackle, and they host Michigan in Beaver Stadium. And Beaver Stadium's a hornet's nest. It's the best home field environment in existence. Anything can happen there. Anything. So those are my thoughts. Sorry if it took a little long, but I take long because when I say these things, I'm not hating on Penn State. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying just wait, because Michigan and Ohio State are going to lose a ton after this year. You're going to return a lot. And that recruiting on the line offensively is going to really pay off, I think, in 2024.
When I look at Penn State, I really feel like they got a chance to do it, man. Like, I really feel like Penn State could really at least split 1-1 versus Michigan or Ohio State, because they have the opportunity to do so, because they have a game at home, and that's the best chance to pull off these upsets. Remember Tennessee last year? Their biggest wins. Alabama, which they hadn't beaten in some time, took down the goalposts because they were able to play them at home. Now, if they play that game in Tuscaloosa, it may be a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's what I said. I mean, if they were to play Michigan in Ann Arbor this year, I couldn't look at you with a straight face if you said they were going 12-0. Now with Ohio State, because of that tackle mismatch, there's a scenario where Penn State gets like a few forced fumbles because Josh Simmons just gets pushed over by Chop Robinson every play, and Penn State, through turnovers and just ruining the whole game plan, comes out with a close win. But
they got a good secondary too, like one of the best secondaries in college football.
They do.
So they do match up really well. So it's like they kind of got a chance, depending on if Drew Allar ends up being him this year. They probably could do a little something.
Yeah, Ohio State's their best chance. My power rankings would disagree with me, but I think Penn State has a better shot to beat the Buckeyes in Columbus than they do even Michigan at home, just due to matchups. Like, Penn State might finally be built to beat Ohio State this year, but I don't think they're built to beat Michigan. But at the same time, that home field advantage, I'm never going to say you won't have a chance if you're a good team and you have Beaver Stadium as your home field. So those are my thoughts on Penn State. Do you have any more thoughts? Like, what do you think of where do you think their defense and offense places in the Big Ten?
Honestly, I feel like they got the top 3 defense going into the Big Ten this year. I feel like Iowa's going to be up there. I feel like Michigan's going to be up there. And I feel like Ohio State's defense will be massively improved. So I think with Manny Diaz as their DC, he potentially will get a head coaching job next year. I feel like he's going to have a really good job of, taking care of a defense that has a lot of talented athletes on it. They can throw a lot of different fronts at you due to the athleticism that they have, and they got a really good secondary. So like you said earlier, they match up incredibly well with Ohio State. So really, I think it really comes down to Drew Allar, and you probably do need a little bit more help at wide receiver. So most likely next year will be their year, but I still do think that there's a pretty good chance, 1 through 10, if I had to rate it, 6 out of 10, I feel like they could possibly have only 1 loss this year.
Yeah. Let me tell you something else, too. Oh, you can get to that. I'm sorry.
I appreciate the super chats from Bulldogs 1777, 76. Great show. Go Dogs. Stephen Light donates $4.99. He says, good show. Appreciate the donations in the super chat. Once again, if you haven't already, make sure that you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel. We go live every day, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Make sure that you are subscribed to my guy, College Football with Sam. He has some of the best college football content on YouTube. A very great, relaxing voice, man. And we got to move on to this, right?
One thing before we move on, then I promise we'll be done. Fun fact about Penn State. Returning production isn't everything. TCU and Minnesota are teams that I'm very high on who are abysmal in returning production, but it's something that people use religiously. Guess where Penn State is in returning production? Like, where are they?
Top 10?
Not even close. They're outside the top 50 nationally. It's mainly because of quarterback leaving, which is sort of an illusion, but Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, they return more. Just to highlight that. That's something that I don't think a lot of people know.
Let's get into the Pac-12. Will the Pac-12 finally get a team in the college football playoffs? And if they do, who has the best chance of making it?
Yes, they will. And it will be a team who's made it before. It'll be Washington. Washington Huskies. Michael Penix is going to throw for over 5,000 yards, and he is going to – that offense is going to be one of the best in the nation. And the defense returns a lot too, so they'll get better. If very underrated defensive ends.
I really was leaning Washington, but I really feel like Oregon got a chance. And USC too. It's like they got the talent on defense. USC really does. They got a really good secondary. They got a lot of talented people from the transfer portal. And you already know the offense is going to be there just off the fact that you have Caleb Williams, the best quarterback in college football right now. So they came close last year, but they lost to Utah twice. And it's like Utah, I don't know how you feel about Utah, but I feel like Utah doesn't play like a Pac-12 team. They play like those old school Wisconsin teams with Brett Bielema. So it's like Utah just has a certain level of physicality that is just a problem for, you know, teams like USC for some reason late in the season. Like I remember when they lost to Oregon, like they busted Oregon in the mouth twice in the regular season and in the playoffs. So it's like you definitely can't overlook Utah, but I feel like outside of them though, like I really like USC over pretty much everybody else in this conference for real. Now Washington, they do got Michael Penix, but it's like this conference is kind of going to be like a Russian roulette. And if I had to go for a team that I trust the most and stay consistent, is USC because they got Lincoln Riley and they got Caleb Williams. You know, they got the consistency there. These are pretty young coaches. You know, Kalen DeBoer. You also at Oregon got Dan Lanning. So it's like I kind of feel like with these younger coaches sometimes and these big spots, they kind of end up coming up a little bit flat. And plus, I feel like Colorado, they're the kind of team with Coach Prime, like they could end up pulling off a one big upset at the end of the year on one of these teams that's playoff likely. So I'm going to go with the school that has the most experienced quarterback coach combination right now. And the fact that, you know, Caleb Williams is pretty much unstoppable unless you get him injured. But what about you, though?
Yeah, my pick, there are a few things that I wrote down. The best... the Pac-12 teams with the best chance to win it all are Washington, Utah, and USC. Washington, because I think they're the best overall Pac-12 team. They have a great quarterback. Their offense, this might be a controversial take, their offense is Ohio State level good. And that's something that I don't list for anyone. That's like the only team that's on Ohio State's level offensively will be Washington. And they may not even be there, but it's the only team that can crack that glass ceiling. That's very high in the air. For Utah, it's because they're consistent. I think they're the most physical and deepest team while also retaining some talent. They have a good quarterback, great run game. USC, you know that I don't necessarily like them, but they have Caleb Williams. They have the best quarterback in the country. And you can't beat that. You can't beat a clutch player. And when he's healthy, and if the offensive line reloads, and they have a great wide receiver room, and maybe Alex Grinch gets it figured out on defense, they become that team. But then I think that Oregon and Oregon State will have an easier time reaching the playoff than Utah or USC. They just don't have the ceiling to win it, but I think their floor might be higher. Oregon State has a very easy schedule. They're consistent. And Oregon's the team who on offense, they're back to what they were old school. They're all speed. Troy Franklin's fast. Bo Nix is fast. Bucky Irving is lightning fast. So those are my thoughts. And then, yeah, I mean, yeah.
I really like USC, and it's like I really do think Oregon has a shot. I really do. I really feel like late last season when Bo Nix kind of was playing through some injuries and you know how they lost to Oregon State. Oh my God, that was terrible. They lost that game basically strictly all special teams more than anything else. But with Oregon, you know, it's like they got a really talented team and their offense should still be scary. They got a really good offensive coordinator who's going to be replacing Kyle Winningham. Or not Kyle Winningham. Who's the offensive coordinator that they had last year?
Kenny Dillingham.
There you go.
The ham at the end of the last
yeah.
gets
Kenny
you.
Dillingham. But it's like they got a really good one from UTSA. So I think that offensively they're going to be fine. But their defense was terrible last year. But they did hit the transfer portal pretty hard. And Dan Lanning is a defensive-minded coach. So if he can get that defense playing well, I mean, I really feel like it can come down to any one of those three teams, Washington, USC, or Oregon. But I still kind of got to lean with USC, though. Like, I was on a Washington bandwagon a couple of weeks ago, but I'm bipolar, so I'm on the USC bandwagon because, like, this defense can't be no worse than what it was last year. And I know things can always get worse, but it's like they have way too many talent. They have way too much talent on the defense.
Yeah. And to be real here, I think there might
defense to win a championship. Like, you just need like a top 50 defense.
Yeah, but then you have to have a very exceptional offense, like 2019 LSU level exceptional. And even though USC is the better quarterback, in my opinion, Washington is the much better O-line, they have the far superior supporting cast. The difference is quarterback. Like, if you put Caleb Williams in Washington, that team would hang 50 on anyone. They have, like even against Michigan, who I'm picking to beat Washington in the semifinal, I'd be scared if Caleb Williams was the quarterback with that supporting cast. And I think that quarterback's very important. And yeah, I mean, like, they're very talented, USC is. And they also brought in all four of they run a 3-3-5, but they have, you know, like that third linebacker who can also be a pass rusher. All like 3 or 4 of their down linemen or hybrids are all incoming transfers. So I find that to be interesting. There's a lot of room for complete failure or just straight out of the cannon success there.
Yeah, when I look at USC though, it's just like I just trust Lincoln Riley. It's not like he hasn't made it to the college football playoffs before when he was at Oklahoma with a defense that wasn't all that great. And when you look at these Pac-12 teams, like, you know, USC isn't the only team going into this year with a lot to prove on defense. Like, Washington's defense wasn't good. Oregon's defense was terrible. So some of the better teams in this conference kind of have questions on defense outside of Oregon State and Washington State. But
yeah,
Georgia, back-to-back national titles. And now, Sam, we're talking about them potentially three-peating, man. And I think they're going to do it. I don't know about you, but I feel like nobody's going to stop Georgia this year. Even if they get one loss, as long as it doesn't happen in the playoffs, I feel like they're going to go all the way, man. Like, I just feel like with Carson Beck at QB, it's like a passing of the torch. I saw him going off in the spring game, and one thing about it, I pride myself on being unbiased, but we are always going to be biased when it comes to brothers from the 904. And I've actually seen Carson Beck play, like, in person. Like, he was going crazy. He was going crazy against Shaheem Singletary and them boys, man. Like, first quarter it was a blowout, and even though my school still won, like he still was going crazy after the first quarter. It's like he was playing like a man possessed. Now he isn't crazy athletic, but he does have enough athleticism that you have to account for it. And I feel like Georgia now, the narrative that Georgia doesn't have talent at receiver, like they're finally utilizing the transfer portal. They lost A.D. Mitchell. They got Dominic Lovett from Missouri. He's probably the best receiver that they done picked up from the transfer portal. And then you got Lab McConkey coming back, and you still got Brock Bowers, and you already know how talented Georgia is up front. Like me and you off camera a couple of days ago, we're talking about the size of their offensive line for their incoming recruiting class. So it's like, you messing with some monsters up front, man. Like I just don't think that nobody in college football right now is equipped to handle what Georgia has up front. And I know everybody makes it about stars, but Georgia just recruits different caliber offensive linemen. Like they are recruiting freaks. People go look at Georgia's incoming recruiting class with their offensive linemen. Like I think the lowest weight that they had was 315, man. They got people that's like 6'7", 6'8", like massive human beings that are all super athletic. So it's like I don't really think that no team really is equipped to go toe to toe with Georgia up front.
Yeah. I mean, what do you call it? This is just an opinion because I think there's a lot of validity to the claim that Georgia's going to win it all. Even my own Wolverines, who I think are better, and they're going to be better than Georgia. Again, football's a game of matchups, and matchups are in Georgia's favor against Michigan. They're heavily in Georgia's favor. So I look and I just don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they're going to go 3 in a row. I don't. I think all in all that this team, Georgia, is going to go 12-0. They're going to win the SEC. I actually think that Carson Beck is going to break the Georgia school record for passing yards in a season. He's going to shatter Stetson Bennett's record that he had last year in fewer games because I don't have them winning at all. In fact, I don't have them even reaching the national championship. And that is because there's one team who I have absolute faith wouldn't just beat Georgia, but would beat them to a pulp. That would emasculate them on national TV. It's not Michigan. That would be a biased take because schematically Michigan does not have the receivers to behead the Bulldog defense. But you know who does? And you know who returns their O-line? And you know if they have healthy running backs? And you know who's going to have an elite defense? There's a lot of what-ifs here, especially the defense, but I believe in this. The Ohio State Buckeyes, if they match up again in that semifinal, which I'm predicting they will, game over. The game, it'll be like 2020 Clemson versus Ohio State after they lost the previous year last minute. They will be assassinated the minute they take the field. So if you don't face Ohio State, by all means, you're probably winning it. Like, even though, again, I think Michigan's better, that doesn't factor in matchups, like, because that's at least according to power rankings. And I'd say Michigan, Georgia, slightly lean Georgia, or 50-50, maybe slightly lean Michigan, but I wouldn't be confident picking either. It'd be a really great even game, in my opinion. Ohio State, Georgia, unless Ryan Day, does something really stupid and more than once, they should beat them. But their O-line is just huge, like what you said. And they return Cedric Van Pran. Defensively, they're going to plug and play. Their secondary should get better, which might prove what I think about Ohio State being wrong, because Georgia should have better defensive backs. They could go 15-0. They could win it all. And unlike the past 2 seasons, or unlike 2021 at least, I wouldn't be surprised.
Man, the only team that really scared me, honestly, I mean, Ohio State is up there. I did say that Ohio State was the biggest threat to Georgia's three-peat, but I feel like they also could lose a game to Bama in the SEC championship game and still get in. But it's like, I feel like they can beat Ohio State. I feel like it could go either way because we remember how last year's semifinal matchup went. Many people consider that to be the real national championship. But I think that Georgia, with the fact that you pretty much should still have good play calling with your OC and Mike Bobo taking over. And then you still have the fact that you have some really talented quarterbacks. As a matter of fact, you got more talent at QB than what you have with Stetson Bennett. No disrespect, but a lot of people would tell you that Georgia was one of the few teams in history to win a national championship with their most talented QB being a backup. But Stetson Bennett, he was really good. He was a gamer. He was a really good fit in Todd Monken's offense. But Carson Beck has a way stronger arm than Stetson Bennett, and all these other guys, they are just a little bit more bigger than Stetson Bennett also. But Stetson Bennett had a lot of heart. I'm not saying this to disrespect them, but you got QBs that got way more talent than what Stetson Bennett had, and plus you're giving those guys weapons on the outside like Dominic Lovett. And you already know their defense, their secondary is arguably one of the best in college football. So they match up well with Ohio State because Ohio State does have good receivers. And if you want to beat Georgia, you got to have receivers that can challenge that secondary, and you got to have good QB play. But I'm not counting out them. It's just I got to see what their QBs. At least with Ryan Day, I know that his quarterback situation shouldn't really be too much of an issue because both of the two guys they got competing should be pretty solid.
Yeah. Oh, both schools will have great, talk about Ohio State and Georgia, both will have great quarterback play. I think Georgia, what do you think about this? Like, do you have a weakness for the team? Not a weakness as in like something that's they're bad at, but like an area on the team where it doesn't fit in, or it's the weak link in the chain.
I got one. They need to stop racing. They not in that. They not NASCAR drivers. They need to drive the speed limit and stop getting in trouble with them speeding tickets and everything off the field. Honestly.
Yeah. It's actually, you know what? It's a really good point that I'm going to keep in my mind, like in my back folder. I think if that doesn't stop, I think that could be a sign of arrogance if it doesn't stop. Like if it just continues and it's never addressed, that could be a pride thing that just bites them in the butt randomly. I was going to go on the field, but your answer tells me, and it's a fair answer, that you don't think they have any on the field problems.
I mean, on the field, I feel like maybe quarterback. I'm not saying it's a complete weakness, but I mean, you never know what you're going to get early out the gate with a young QB. And plus, it's like going on the road is different. You got to play Tennessee on the road. That's going to be a really hostile environment. But it's not like I'm concerned. Like I got 10 out of 10 confidence in Carson Beck. Matt Jones was kind of a similar way. And I kind of feel like Carson Beck, his situation is a little bit similar to how Mac Jones' situation played out, waiting for a couple of years, and then the year that he takes over, he ends up having a really good squad around him. So I think Carson Beck's going to be fine. I don't really have any concerns about Georgia. Like I just feel like for Georgia, even if they have some games that they almost lose, I feel like they normally play their best football against their best competition. And sometimes they do play down, but I don't really have any concerns about this team really outside of, playing Bama and Ohio State. That's really where I feel like, they won't lose because they have like major weaknesses, but I feel like they probably will lose just because, you're playing with two evenly matched teams. Alabama's going to get theirs. You feel me? You're not just about to, treat Alabama like they roadkill or anything. You feel me? They still a threat. So for Georgia, I really feel like Alabama, due to Nick Saban and the talent they have, they get QB right. They got a shot to take down Georgia in the SEC championship or Ohio State.
Yeah. For me, it's not a big concern because they have a really good O-line. For me, it's just running back. I think Georgia's like the perfect example of a team where the running backs look good statistically because there's wide open holes, but that's not really a problem anyway, and they still have good backs. We talked about this off air. but I want to hear it again. What do you think about LSU versus Georgia rematch, SEC championship game?
I still like Georgia. I don't really know about LSU. Like, I don't think they're going to be down or anything. I still feel like there would be a 9-10 win team or better this year, but maybe they might have just found a little bit of fire early because the rest of the SEC West is way more competitive this year. So I think that LSU is going to be tested way more. And I do remember them getting smacked and blown out by Tennessee. You feel me? And the way they did beat Alabama, it's like you're playing Alabama on the road in Tuscaloosa. You feel me? So it's like for LSU, like they really want to get tested this year. I'm not saying last year what they did was a fluke, but I'm just saying like, this year I kind of feel like people may just have too high expectations for Brian Kelly in year two just because of the fantastic year one they had. And we've seen plenty of coaches have amazing year ones and then kind of fall off a little bit, i.e. Mel Tucker. But it's like, I look at Georgia. I just feel like Georgia is just a little bit more there up front than LSU, even though I don't think LSU is going to get blown out and ran out the building like how they did last year. But I feel like it probably will be a more closer competitive game, but I probably still would take Georgia.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. There's just too many questions in the trenches for LSU. I will say, though, they have the best defensive tackle room in the nation. So if we're going to find out how good those running backs are from Georgia, line them up against LSU's D tackles, and we'll see firsthand.
Yeah, LSU, they definitely do have some monsters on defense. They have Mason Smith, who could be a potential second, first round pick in next year's draft. I love his game a lot. And then they also got Harold Perkins, who was a freshman phenom last year. And they
Yep.
did have a lot of talent in the secondary, but it's kind of still leaning Georgia in my head for me, just because, like, I just think for LSU, I still feel like they're a program that's still ascending. I don't think they don't have a shot at beating Georgia. Like I said, I feel like they can give them a competitive game, but they got some monsters. But I think Georgia at the end of the day is still probably going to be able to prevail. They just have so many talented players on defense, especially in that secondary. But like I said, like LSU can give them a close game, and I wouldn't be surprised if LSU pulled off the upset. But I kind of like Georgia. I just
Yeah.
feel like the only team really capable of beating Georgia this year is probably Alabama and Tennessee. Probably the only reason I give the Vols a shot is because they are hosting Tennessee. Well, they're hosting Georgia at home this year. They don't have to go on the road, so maybe Georgia could come out a little bit flat in that game or something like that happens. But I really feel like the two teams with the best chance of beating Georgia or Ohio State and Alabama. But I really like Georgia to get their third this year.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the ACC. Now, can FSU or Clemson make it back to the college football playoffs? FSU was in the first inaugural 14 college football playoffs, like nearly a decade and some change ago. And then you got Clemson, who recently hasn't really sniffed the college football playoff as late. So, Sam, I'm going to start off with you. Do you think that FSU or Clemson can make it into the playoffs this year?
They absolutely can. I don't think either of them will, though. And if one of them does, I'm going to be very careful with how I say this. If one of them makes it in, I'm not expecting a competitive game that will favor them. I'm not. So that's basically my thoughts in summary. I mean, Clemson has a ridiculously easy schedule, but that is kind of counterproductive in the sense that they could be 13-0. They could have a ton of one possession wins. Everyone knows they're not good. Everyone in their pet. And they win the ACC because they're 13-0 in Power 5. They basically have to get in by committee rules. And then Georgia shows up somehow wins by an even larger margin than they did against TCU. And then it's like, well, why do you let them in? And it's because they have an easy schedule. Florida State's more interesting because they actually have a schedule. They have a tougher schedule. If Florida State goes 13-0 with that schedule, to me, there's no doubt they're at least top 8. Clemson could be the 15th best team in the country and go 15-0 with that schedule. Not 15-0, 13-0, depending on how Florida State pans out.
Man, I don't know. Like, Clemson doesn't really have the easiest schedule. You got to play Duke week 1, and I know you may be like, man, Duke ain't just the basketball school anymore, Sam. Like, they play football now. So it's like they got a really good team. And it's not like I'm saying like Duke is going to beat Clemson this year, but that game could potentially tell us, you know, if Clemson is the team that we believe them to be, because if that offense still struggles with Garrett Riley at the helm against Duke, I'm going to have some concerns. But, I mean, you got FSU, but then you also got to play Notre Dame, and then you got North Carolina, and then you got South Carolina. So, I mean, I don't really think their schedule is the easiest. I feel like if they do win, like, they'll be battle tested. But I think that FSU has the better overall roster, though. Like, maybe I'm just a little bit biased towards Florida State because I am a big fan of that 6'7" wide receiver they have named Johnny Wilson. Like, where the hell do you find a 6'7" wide receiver? Like, I don't know why the hell Arizona State let that go, but they crazy for letting that happen, man. Like, there's no way they should have let Johnny Wilson walk out of Arizona State like that. So, you bring in... So, who else did they get from the transfer portal, man? They got that receiver from Michigan State.
Keon Coleman.
Yes, you bring in Keon Coleman with Johnny Wilson. That's one of the best wide receiver duos in college football. That's a really nasty duo. And then you got Jordan Travis, who a lot of people are picking to win the Heisman Trophy this year. And I do think he has the squad around him that will allow him to do so, because they also have the best offensive line that they've had since their championship days a couple of years back under Jimbo Fisher. And their defense is going to be really good. They got a really fantastic secondary. They got a great group of linebackers, and they're really good up front. So I think FSU just has a more talented team this year than Clemson. Clemson, you know, they don't really utilize the transfer portal all that often. So it's like, I still don't know how that offensive line is going to look. And they got a couple of good receivers that I like that have potential to be great, but I don't really know if their team is as talented as Florida State this year.
I'm in full agreement with you. I think Florida State has the better roster, hands down. They're power rated higher in my power rankings, and they're rated higher than Clemson in my actual top 25. They're the highest rated ACC team. I think their schedule plays to the disadvantage of Mike Norvell, because that road game against Clemson and the neutral site against LSU, I have a hard time seeing Florida State winning. But I think this is going to be a team that is going to get better throughout the year, and they top down do have that better roster. And by blue chip, no, but I mean, who? To a certain degree, my mind's kind of like, who cares? Clemson hasn't looked good the past 2 seasons, and it's not just been offensively, but last year their defense didn't look good either in big moments. I mean, like, in retrospect, Syracuse was a bloated team when they faced Clemson. Letting them drive on you, letting Notre Dame pound the football, South Carolina just airing it out, Tennessee airing it out. So I agree with you. Florida State's roster, much better. I'd rather take that roster any day compared to Clemson's.
Is Texas a lock to win the Big 12? Or simply to put it, is the Big 12 Texas footballs to lose?
They're my overwhelming favorite to win the conference. But there's TCU, there's Kansas State, there's Kansas. You might be thinking, well, Sam, where's Oklahoma? I don't trust Brent Venables. End of story. TCU, Kansas State, Kansas. There's an interesting... I think those teams are interesting. but Texas, best roster, best talent. I mean, I think if they don't win it this year, it's very discouraging heading into SEC play.
Man, like, I'm going to pick them to win it, but I'm not going to say they're locked to win it. Because I really feel like Kansas is going to be like that this year. I feel like Kansas is going to be that team that's going to be this version's college football seasons of last year's Tennessee. They got a lot of guys coming back. As a matter of fact, they have a ton of production coming back. You have a very great quarterback in Jalen Daniels, who a lot of people forget. Before he went down with that injury, he was a legitimate Heisman contender. Like, he was in the conversation, and Kansas was 5-0. So they got a lot of production coming back. I think that they maybe pull off the upset against Texas. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but I'm saying there's a chance, because I think that Kansas is going to be able to get up with Texas this year. Because, Texas is going to be riding high off that big win against Alabama if they end up getting it. So it's like, imagine how they could end up walking into that Kansas game, and it kind of end up being a letdown game. Now, I'm not going to guarantee them a win, Kansas. I'm not, because they do have to play Texas at home in that game, and it's hard to win against Texas there. But it's like, I kind of feel like Oklahoma got a shot. Like, I haven't lost faith in Brent Venables. It's like, I don't know why you don't have the faith in them that I do, but I think that Oklahoma is going to be a much better team this year. I don't feel like they're a challenge for this conference this year. I still feel like they'll be a 9-win team, but I still do feel like they could potentially shock some people. But I really do like Kansas and Texas Tech, and then I like Oklahoma too.
Yeah. Watching Max Duggan look like prime Patrick Mahomes and Tay Barber look like, what's his face on the Miami Dolphins? Tyreek Hill against Oklahoma. I watched that game. I couldn't believe what I was watching. And I know they were gutted, but 52, I think it was, the final score was like 52-24 or 55-24. And in my mind, I'm like, come on, man. It's bad. But I could be proven wrong. They're recruiting very well. Oklahoma is. Kansas, I like what you said about them. They are, I know that Texas fans would rather most things in life occur to them than Kansas beating them for the second time under Steve Sarkisian. But they're really good offensively. And I think they're number 2 in the Power 5 in returning production. Yeah. And Jalen Daniels, Jason Bean, their backup returns, and he's like a great backup. They also have the running back, it's not Mason Fairchild. That's their tight end. They're really good tight end. Devin Neal, running back. Definitely top 15, top 20 running back. And their O-line was respectable last year. It should be good or great this season. And if their defense just improves a little, maybe they are like TCU. Maybe that's an underrated pick for the CFP, is like Kansas being last year's TCU. Good offense. Win tons of close games. You have a defense that isn't great, but shows up when it matters. Now that I think about it, that might be one of my, not like bold predictions, but like best value pick. Might even make somewhat not as large of a bold prediction as that, but like I might have to change my Kansas prediction after thinking about that.
I'm not going to pencil Texas in as a lock to win the Big 12, but on the scale of 1 through 10, I do have like a 8.5 out of 10 rating that they will win the Big 12 this year. What about you?
You think Kansas State can do it? That's what you're asking.
I don't know. Like, I get why Kansas State has so much hype behind it, but it's like, I feel like Kansas is going to be a little bit better. Texas Tech is going to be a little bit better. Like, I really feel like those two teams are going to be above them this year. But I'm not going to discredit them. Like, I do like their quarterback. He reminds me a little bit like Dak Prescott. But
Will Howard.
yeah, like I like Will Howard a little bit, but it's like I just think that Texas Tech and Kansas are gonna have better squads this year, and Kansas just has so much coming back, and they just have the more dynamic quarterback. So I think that
Yeah.
Texas is probably going to win it, but I'm not going to say they're a sure thing to win it. I wouldn't say, oh, the Big 12 is Texas to lose.
Yeah. Kansas is not Kansas, but Kansas State. Kansas State, I was originally very high on after 2022, like knowing that Will Howard would return, get nice receivers. Ben Sinot, their tight end, he's back. They returned Cooper Beebe and the entire offensive line. But just doing more research and their run game, huge part of their success. And they just lost Deuce Vaughn, though they picked up Florida State's backup in the portal. Forget his name. I apologize. And a few other receivers in the portal. I just don't know with them. I just think that Texas is going to be better. And there's just something about how TCU and Kansas play football that I really like in the Big 12. And then the other team that you mentioned, Texas Tech, that's another team that could do what TCU did last year. They return production. They have a lot of COVID seniors. I don't know why I'm not high on Texas Tech. Because I like the direction they're going as a program, but I'm going to have to think about that one more because I'm not high on them. They have a really good D line and a good quarterback, but I guess I have to do a little more digging, or maybe I'm onto something that other people aren't. But
Everyone, this is our guy, College Football with Sam. We appreciate you for coming on tonight on the first inaugural episode of JT Sports After Dark, man. Had a good time chatting college football with you.
I did too. Oh my gosh, I'm tired.
No, I am too. I'm not even going to lie to you. But right before we let you go, let the people one last time let everybody know where you got going on the channel. You got media day coming around the corner. The season's around the corner. What can they expect to see from college football from Sam?
My bold predictions video, but from my subscribers. So I'm going to be reviewing my subscribers' bold predictions. That's coming tomorrow or Friday. And we're going to be talking about the top 3 teams in the nation. It's going to be a little, not like a series, but I'm going to talk about Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio State and their offensive lines, either in one video or in separate videos, because I think those O-lines, there's stuff to talk about there. I really like trench play.
You guys, one more time, make sure to go ahead, subscribe, and check out my guy, College Football with Sam. You can find him on YouTube. You also can find him on Apple and Spotify, College Football with Sam. Once again, we appreciate you for coming on. We definitely got to have you back on again. And make sure that guys check out the JT Sports Podcast. We're not just available on YouTube. You can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. Rate us 5 stars. We're trying to get the 100 5-star reviews before the college football season and NFL season kick off. So make sure that you guys go ahead, give us a 5-star review. All you got to do is type in the JT Sports Podcast on any podcasting platform and it will pop up. Or you can go down to the description down below, scroll down, and there will be the links to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast. One last time, we appreciate you for coming on College Football with Sam.